Hey everybody, in this video we're going to take a look at creating some rocks. We'll call these kind of hero rocks versus our low poly rocks that we can create. So let's go to here, create a geometry node, call this rock. And then I'm going to, let's create a sphere. I'm going to switch it over to a polygon so that we have this type of mesh. Frequency, kick that up maybe to like 50. We're going to need a lot of topology. We're going to probably end up with more than what we have here, but that's going to be a start. So one way we could start adding some noise to modify this is create a mountain node. Oops, I jumped in. There we go. So if we visualize this, you can see kind of what it does. We can adjust the amplitude. We can adjust the element size. So depending on the size, also the type of noise that we are creating. So the amplitude's going to be too high for that. We can kind of see what we're doing here. So you got different types of noise that you can play around with and get different results. Actually, I like that. So that's one way to start getting the shapes. Actually, this kind of is not bad at all for a rock. But what we're going to do is do a point pop. And let's visualize this here. And then we have some inputs and outputs that we can go to here. And this will give us different ways to connect it and to be able to deform the geometry. In previous lessons, we used this to create a planet. Here we're going to do a system similar to what we did in the planet, but we are going to create it to make a rock. So we can take the point data, and if we connect that directly into the color, we can kind of see an output of all the different colors we can see, and we can see that it gets a different value depending on where it is in space. So that is good for us to start working with. I'm going to push Y, cut this, and then let's connect a noise. And what I'm going to do is a unified static noise because we're not going to be animating it. By default, it connects it into the CC bias, and that's not what I need. So if I just click and drag that into the position, that gives us an effect. And let's go into the color. And we can kind of see that it shifted the color a little bit. It's going to be a little bit easier to see it if we turn off our wire shaded, which is here. We're just going to smooth shaded. And then, so that we can see this a little bit better, let's do a fit range and connect it here. So we can basically kind of like add more contrast from our source. And you can kind of see the noise patterns that we're starting to develop there. So now that we have this extra control, we can go here and start playing around with the noise. Noise type right now, we're getting a 3D input, and we're doing a 1D out, which is fine. Right now it's on simplex. We can switch it over to whirly. And then maybe get the frequency kind of like that. And then we'll see if we can add noise in a minute, but that is okay. So this is basically whatever's white is going to be pushed out, and the more white or closer to white it is, the more it's going to be pushed out. So right now it's just affecting the color, but we want to add a displacement, so we can do um, displace along normal. And then we're going to connect this value into the amount, and then the displace position into the P here. And we can kind of see what we're getting right now with the noise. So we can play around with the noise or change the noise types. So here we can bring the frequency, and also with the displacement we can adjust the scale, so that way it is not really like exploding our geometry, which is not necessarily what we want. We just want it to create a surface that we can manipulate and adjust. So this is kind of getting closer. Actually, this could be really interesting if we did something like this. If we wanted kind of like a lava rock or kind of like a magical rock or something like that, we can do something like this, and then like maybe add a ramp parameter. And then on this ramp parameter here, if we go out to this level, we can change the white to kind of a rock-ish color. So I wanted more like this, but maybe add a little bit of saturation to be kind of brown. Oh, this should still be white. I'm in the wrong spot. Let's turn that to white. And we need to go up to the rock level and then manipulate it here. So here we can switch this to be kind of any color we want. So I'm gonna make it kind of a brown rock like that. And then if we wanted it to be a lava rock, we go into this black section here, and then we change that to something like this, and then we can add more gradient kind of colors that we are working with. You can see as we bring it more closer to each other, the transition is more or less. And then maybe here we add kind of like an orange. And you can see it looks kind of pixelated right here. And that's because of the resolution. It's easy to work with and fast to work with at this resolution, but if we wanted it to look better, we can increase the frequency, and then we'll get a better look. But we're also going to have a ton more geometry, and it takes a lot more time to manipulate. So that's why I start off with something kind of lower. Oops, not 500, just 50. So we get a rough idea of what we want, and then we can manipulate it later to make it look smoother. So I just wanted to show you that you can create some sort of like stylized lava rock. We'll add a ramp later on, but and if you were, instead of make it red, you can make it like blue. It's kind of like a magical type rock. Here, I'm going to maybe bring the displacement low. And then let's look at this fit range. What did I do? Okay, that's okay. And then we can bring the scale back up on this, and you can kind of see what we're getting. I don't like that noise pattern though for what I'm going for. Let's see. That's different. see if we add a little bit of contrast here. It's looking a little bit more rock-like. And then we can also go back in and adjust the frequency or the offset. So if we didn't like that pattern, this is basically like how we create different patterns. Some of those patterns are not as good as others. Let's play around with another noise here. Oh, and I have the contrast down. I like to start it with the maximum range and then I can crop it in if I need to. Let's check the first Manhattan. No. How about something like this? This might be good enough. And also with this sphere, right now it's like perfectly flat. So if we wanted to, we can like maybe adjust the height so it's kind of like a flatter rock and things like that. So that way it's using a base that is more kind of the shape that you want it to start off as. And then that is interesting. Let's see if we offset this. And say we like that. Okay, so this gives us kind of a base shape to start working with for our color or our shape. But obviously this is like really smooth. It might be okay for a stylized look, but I want to add some noise to this. So one of the things that we can do is like with the fractal type, we can add some noise patterns to this. And then the more we increase these numbers here, basically the more noise we're going to have along the surface. And the intensity of it. So this is kind of like one way that we can go through and manipulate the shape that we had. This is starting to look a little bit more interesting. On top of that, we can also add more noise, just like we did here. So I'm going to alt drag this to create another noise that we want to add on top of this. And then let's connect this into the color. Right now it's exactly the same, so let's try something like this. Let's add the fit range here. Connect this into the color, so that way we can control the contrast. Okay, so with this, let's turn off the noise, the fractal type on the noise really quick. And then not seeing any change in the color. Oh, because it's not plugged in from the noise. We need the noise. There we go. And then here we can kind of adjust the contrast. So here we can kind of see a pattern that we're coming up with. And what we can do is like maybe the frequency on the Y is going to be more. So we can get kind of more striations if we wanted to. Something kind of like that. That would be an interesting pattern to add on to our rock. So what I want to do is add. So we're going to add these two together. You can see that really kind of like stands out. But what I want it to do is do a multiply. And I'm going to multiply this by a constant number. So this constant number lets us input a number. So right now by default it's 0, but what if we did like -1? We can see that it's pushing all of the points down in towards the surface. So we can do like -0.1, and it should give us kind of these marks like this. And then maybe we can put the CD into there. So that way it's kind of a combination of everything that we have so far. And then we can always come back and adjust this constant, maybe 0.01. Maybe that's too little, 0.05. We get that kind of pattern on the rock. Okay, and then right now it's pretty kind of linear and going across, and that might be what you want. You can see that it's kind of does have some vertical noise, but if you wanted to, we can also add some noise into the point before it gets into the noise here. So we can do something like, let's see, noise. Let's add some curl noise. So then we'll do an add. We're going to add this noise onto what we have there. So as we adjust the frequency, you can see that it distorts the position points. So if we look at the position like we had before in the color, CD for color, you can see kind of how it aligns everything there, and you can see that there's kind of quadrants because it's going from 0 to 1 in each one of the directions. But once we take and just add that noise into the position, you'll see that things, well, here it just pushes everything to red, but it has changed. Some of the numbers are going past 1, and it looks like in the red channel. So when you do that, it actually gives us a different value into this than the default position for all the joints, and then, or not the joints, for all the points. And then it gives us a more randomized pattern across the surface. And you can go back in and adjust it. So you're adjusting the frequency, and maybe you want to adjust the amplitude as well. Maybe some roughness. And you end up with different patterns with each one of the changes that we make. Okay, so I'm liking that. And then let's add one more noise. And here we're going to add it onto there as well. But we're going to put it into the color first so that we can see what's going on. So I don't need the striations anymore. Let's go into this one and let's put it 1.9 really quick. I'm going to change the pattern. Let's try Manhattan, and then we're going to need a fit range. So let's connect the noise into the value and the value into the color. Okay, and then here, let's increase the frequency. And this is connected into this noise here. I want to connect it directly from the points so that we don't have the distortion yet. Just kind of give us the spectrum of the range. I'm not sure if this is going to be in the shape that I want, but oops, let's drop back in here. Let's increase the frequency. So these are kind of like boxy shaped. I want to try something else. And I'm going to be kind of pushing it. Basically, I want to create like little divots into the rock. And this might be good enough. And we can see that the resolution's really hampering us here. So let's try increasing it a little bit right now, where we still have the ability to move it quite quickly. Okay, going back in here. And I think I still want to increase it more. Okay, and then let's look at maybe adding some noise, kind of like what we did over here. So let's take the noise and let's do curl noise 2D and then add and then this should give us points all over the place for it, but maybe we don't necessarily want it all over the place. So let's take another noise here. Let's make the frequency much lower. Let's output this into the color. The color is going into the noise here. Oops, going in the other direction now. Let's just type in 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, so we have that. Let's add a fit range here. So let's say we only want it in these kind of white spaces. We want those, like that divot detail. So what we can do is multiply these to get together. Multiply. We're going to take this, multiply it by this, and then connect that into the color so that we can see what's going on. So you can see that we're only going to get those divots in that area. So let's add that over here. And again, you can see that they're poking out. Maybe if you wanted like crystalline surfaces, that could be kind of nice. But because they're pointing outwards, we're going to add a multiply. And then a constant. And this constant will allow us to adjust it in any direction that we want. So here we can see that it is pointing inwards. And then I'm just going to connect this into the color so that we can see the overall texture that we have. So here we can see we have divots in certain sections. It's not all over the place. So that's just kind of something that you can use to control where you want the divots. But like if you didn't like that, you can, I don't remember which one it was. Nope, the other way. If you want them all over the place, just do that. And then you get all of that displacement happening everywhere. And so 0.05. Maybe this one we do want it 0.01. There we go. So we have the little divots all over the place. Or maybe you don't want them in these cracks here. So you can take this. Oops, we want the reverse of that. So before we multiply it. Actually, that only gives it to us in the cracks. It should be this one. Maybe the color's very dim and it, yeah. So you can see that it's not completely white, so we don't notice it as much. So if we go here, instead of pointing at such a low value, this one's going to have to be higher so that we can see those divots actually show up. There you go. Oh, it's still only putting it in the cracks. But we don't need to do that. We want it all over the place. There we go. So we got that going on there. And then we can add that ramp parameter here. And then remember, just go out to the geometry level and scroll down here, and then we can control what this looks like. So like make this a dark blue. And then maybe this white is kind of like something like that, and then it transitions all the way into like a stone gray. And I want to bring more of that in. Maybe over here to kind of a lighter gray, something like that. Yeah, I don't like that as much. Maybe something like that. So you got like that blue elemental kind of color. Or you can just go kind of more normal type rock. So it's going to be like darker in the cracks. And this is going to be something around there. go. I don't know, something like that. It's just a little bit more stone-like. And then obviously we can throw material on there and um, make sure that it is um, got more roughness, and let's see, want it a little bit shiny. But also turn the metallic all the way off, reflectivity kind of lower. So that way it's more rock-like. Okay, so that is kind of a way to generate some shapes that you can use for rocks. And then the cool thing about doing this is that we can go back in here, and if we needed more rocks, let's do a grid. And then in here, let's take a look at this unified noise, and on the offsets, is it middle mouse button click? No. Right click? Left click? No. Let's see. It's the fractal position offset. Let's try middle mouse button click here. Yeah. Promote parameter. So that offset is here, but now if we go out here, we have that offset, and we can change this value, and it should change the rock. Oh, this is for the this is not for the major noises. Oops. Oh, that is. Let's take a look at this node again. There we go. Now we get it out here. And if I change it here, does it change? It should change it. I'm not seeing why it's not. The frequency's changing it. The offset should change it too. There we go. So you get different rock styles if you change the offsets. I wanted to, let's try just going here and promote parameter again. And take this and change it. Yeah, it's changing it. So you get different rock styles. So if we have a grid here, let's make it a much bigger grid. Let's make it 100 by 100. Let's add a mountain node. And increase the amplitude. And let's add more resolution. Now that we have more resolution, the amplitude is quite high. Let's adjust these settings a little bit. Okay, so we have a simple kind of like terrain surface. And then we want to put points on this surface so that we can copy the rocks. We can do a scatter. Oops. here. So we have points. They're kind of evenly spread out because of the relaxed iterations. So I'm going to decrease that, and then let's decrease the point of rocks. So that way there's less rocks all over the surface. And then let's do a copy stamp. Primitives to copy, it's going to be these rocks, and then template to copy to, it's going to be those points. So it's going to take a little bit of time because these are so high resolution. So if you want to just create the general ones, you probably should, let me escape out of here. It did it anyways, but just for speed's sake, I'm going to adjust it later. Right now, actually. Here, I'm going to put it down to 50 for now. So that way it all works a little bit faster. So on this stamp node, any attribute that you want to adjust, you can turn on the stamp attribute here. We can do offset, and the offset will do a fit 01 based off of a random number from the point number plus 5 plus 5, and then we can randomize it from, let's say, 0 to 1000. Okay, so we have that value, and then here in offset we can say stamp, stamp, and then the string is going to start off with dot dot slash copy 1, which is the node right here that we just created. And then the name of the variable is the next string, which we called offset. And then a default value in case it's not available. And then we can close parentheses. Let's copy this. But if we put that value there, we should already see that each one of the rocks are different, but we can paste that in all of these values. And we should see different rocks all over the place. So this rock is different from this rock, is different from this rock. So they're all randomized a bit, but they have all the same kind of style. And then you can also go into the copy area, turn off transform cumulative, and do the same kind of thing, fit 01, so that way we're getting a new range. Rand from the point number, so $PT plus 10. And maybe the range can be from like 0.5 to 1.5 for the scale. Now, once it takes a little bit of time, you can see that there's some smaller rocks, some bigger rocks, and you can change these values, and you'll get more variation. So some very small ones, some very big rocks. And you can play around with the range like that. And then if you don't like the layout of these, or the way it generated them, you can change this value on the $PT. So we are going to add, like, just add a different number there, and then you'll see that you'll get a different result. Okay. So that works out pretty well. And then we want the grid here again. So we can take this, add it to merge, and then connect the rocks that we copied all over the place. Now we have the rocks on this surface. Maybe add a color here. This color is going to be kind of a brown color for the dirt. Something like that. So we have some rocks, and we have the terrain that we can connect into there. And actually, I'm just going to keep on going and add this into the same video, I think. Let's save this so that I don't lose it. I'll call this. And I saved it as a weird name. Let's save as. There you go. So I have this terrain and I have all these rocks associated with it. What we can do is let's add some grass on into the environment as well. So I'm gonna do a Boolean and A and B. And let's look at the results. There we go. So it went through and created the geometry except where the rocks are. So that's good. That is what I would like. And then let's go here and let us create a null node. And this is going to be our out underscore ground. And we're going to use this as a template to create the grass on, because we don't want the grass to be where the rocks are. We just want to be around where the dirt is only. So on this node, we actually just want the ground and rocks, but we can get access to that in another node. So here, let's just call this ground and rocks. And then let's create another geometry node. And this is going to be our grass start. And we're going to bring in an object merge. And then we're going to select that null node that we just created. So we need to go to the ground and rocks, the out ground there, accept. And then just going through the process of calculating everything again. Might take a second. There we go. So we're back at the object level, and then I'm going to turn off the ground and rocks just so that way we know what we're working with right now. And then in order to create the grass, I'm going to use a hair simulation or a hair gen. So let's go to hair utilities and let's just add fur. Now select an animated skin. We don't have an animated skin. Push enter. There we go. So we have grass here based off of the fur, and then we can turn on the rocks and we can kind of see what we got here. And maybe this grass is too long. So we have the grass start, which is the terrain, and here is going to be a lot of the basic settings. We can bring the grass kind of down so it's shorter. We can increase the density. And these are for our guide curves. So we don't want this to be super, super high. You can see that we get a few guide curves like that, but let's try one. These yellow lines, those are the guide curves, but you can see that you create more hairs between them. I think that's okay. And then let's go to the hair gen here. And then here we can increase the density more from the start groom, so you can see that this is actual geometry. Thickness, though, I want to bring this down. Say 0.1, 0.03. I think that's thick enough for a blade of grass. And then maybe 2. There we go. Then we can go back to the general and increase the density. Okay, let's go to the, let's see, render, skin, attributes, thickness, optimization, general. Does it create? Yeah, we need to go into the hair shader. So the root color, let's start it off kind of like a more saturated color, and that's going to be like at the root tips here. And then as it goes to the tip color, we're going to make that kind of green. And this is going to be too saturated of green, so let's bring the saturated down and the darkness down, something like that. Let's go to the render view and just render this so that we can see as we're changing the hair color to be looking more like grass, making sure that it is looking the way we'd like it to look like. I think it's still calculating out the scene. Let's stop that. It looks like it's having trouble getting the scene loaded, the geometry. So let's go into the object level here. Let's turn off that and turn off this, so that way we're only with the start gen hair. And let's try to render this now. Let's stop that. And here in the hair gen, general, use guides, linear blend, low subdivisions. Render, create geometry and mantra. You switch this over to use SOP geometry. That's going to get rid of that error that we had. Basically, it's going to create actual geometry in the scene before actually rendering it. and that will give us the hair to be actually be able to see in the render. There we go. So we can see that there's some updating that we need to do. Let's go back to the material palette here. Let's bring some of the intensity back, the reflection size. The tip blend here, I want it to get to the green a lot faster. So it's only going to be that orangey color on the roots. That's fine. That's fine. There is something that is tinting it. It's probably secondary reflections. There we go. So the intensity, we can bring this way down because we don't want it to be like shiny like hair really. And this is also going to look a lot better if we have a light in the scene. So let's go back to the object level. And we're going to create a environment light. And I'm just going to plug in a HDR that I have. And I don't need to see the well, we're not going to see it in the in the background in the render. But you can see that they're all casting shadows and the lighting looks a little bit better now. Let's bring the intensity a little bit more up. That's looking a little bit better. And then here, with the density, let's bring this up a lot more. 1,000 might be too much, but we'll see. It's calculating here, still new things. But I do think that 1,000 is going to be too much. Let's bring this down to like 300. We'll try that again. And we can see this in the viewport. That's going to be a lot better. So let's go into render view. And let us render this. Can already tell that's going to be a lot better. Yeah. Okay, so there are things that we're going to need to adjust, but the render is looking so much more better right now. Okay. Let me make sure that I stopped it. Yep. Okay, so we have the hair all generated here, and we have a density of 300, but let's bring this down for right now, just so that we can work with it a little bit easier. And then with the grass groom, actually, let's double click into here. Yeah, we want to do the grass groom here. And then let's do length, set length. And then we're going to put it here. See, by default, it already knows that it needs to connect all three of them in here. So it's overridden what we wrote in side of here as the length. So when we go over here, we have this set length attribute. So let's put it like at 0.35. It's kind of like what we had. But the nice thing about setting the length here is we can set maximum length and we can set minimum length. Set length. And then let's add one more over here. So we have a minimum length. And then here, set length. And not set direction, but set length. And we can set a maximum. So on this one, the minimum, let's put it at 0.1, and then at the maximum, we'll put it at 0.35. And it's a little hard to tell from here. Let's see if we can move back to the object. Let's turn off the visibility here and only work with these curves. So as I adjust these values, it should give us some randomness between the two. It's not really doing what I want. Let's go here. Let's do set as a length, and that's fine. Oh, they had to randomize here. There we go. Minimum length is going to be 0.1, maximum length 0.4. And that should give us some randomness, which I can already tell that it is. And then we can random seed, and as we random seed, you can see the random length happening everywhere. So that's good. Adding some randomness is going to make everything look a lot more believable. And go here. And then let's go to the render view, because I want to look at the render now, because we're going to work with the shader itself too. Material palette, shader, randomness. Let's add some randomness on the hue. Pretty much on all of these. Let's turn it all on and see what we get. So on the specular, nope. Diffuse saturation here, I'm going to bring this higher so that it's more saturated. There's not as much desaturation happening. That is good. And then the hue shift, let's put it a little bit wider range, 0.1 or negative 0.1 to 0.1 here. It gives us a little bit more kind of color variation between the grass. Make it look more believable. It's good. Let's go back to the object level here, and let's add another process and stop this. So we did the set length. Let's do a guide, and we want to do bend. And then let's just turn the visibility back on the curves here. So you can see that there's some bending happening now in each one of them. So the angle is 15 degrees, and we can go like more if we wanted to. And then randomness bias if we wanted to. But here I'm going to also increase kind of some more of the randomness angle. So that way it is kind of really random lengths of grass and scattered around. So let's turn off this, and we can look at it here. See it, all the grass, and it's in each clump that is associated with a hair. It's kind of like get that area to all match up, and it kind of blends between the ones next to it. So that's good. We can also add guide. CLUMP hair clump. So here you can see it brings it all the way up really high, which is not what we want. We can also kind of decrease the clump size. And then we can change the profile of the clumps, the points. I'm not sure why that last one is not cooperating, but we can do something kind of like this. So that way we can adjust it and do the tightness, just decrease it, just so that way it has some semblance of like clumping together in groups, but we don't need it to be like really, really tight like we had at the beginning. We just need it just to clump a tiny bit, and that will give it a little bit more believability. And over here, what did we say, 300? Should fill things up a little bit more. And over here with the guides, density is 5. I'm going to have to increase that because you can see that it's looking very patchy. So let's do it like 100. So that way we have a lot more guides. It's going to take a little bit more time to calculate, but it should give us a more interesting result everywhere. That is looking a lot better. I like that quite a bit. So jumping here. And I want to give it a little bit more randomness on the set length, or more range. Let's do 0.6. Now that we have a lot more guides, you can see that it takes more time to calculate out. Okay, so we have this going on now, and let's take a look at what the render looks like. It should be a lot better than we had a little bit ago. It's looking a lot more like grass. Nice. Especially once you look at it in the mid and um, far distance, it looks really good. I'd probably kind of compose it a little bit differently where I wouldn't have so much grass in the foreground, but you can do what you'd like. Okay. So I'm going to leave it here at this stage for the grass. I like it enough. Okay. So we have some grass, we have some rocks. Let's create a cloud just to have into our scene. Let me get an angle that I kind of like. Okay, let's create a sphere. Jump into it and then let us adjust the position. Move it along to X. Whoa, too far, too far. Probably like -10. There we go. Let's try that again. You know what? I like this position. Let me just delete this sphere really quick. I'm going to create a camera here. So that way I don't lose that position later. Let's go back into that sphere that we're going to turn into a cloud. And create a sphere. Put in there. And then there's our sphere. And we got a lot going on with this grass, so let's turn that off just so that it works a little bit faster. Let's look at it from our camera. You can see that where it is a little bit. Bring it up. And then let's push it back into Z. Do something like that, and then let's make it a little bit bigger. And let's make it wider. Let's create an ISO offset and then scatter points. So here, let's put this like at 10. And then we'll do a copy to points. Oh, because they're offset. Let's cut that and just copy this, and then set this all at 0, 0, 0. Okay, and then we can copy these. There we go. And then actually instead of that, let's use a copy stamp. It's going to be the same thing except that we get some parameters here in the copy node to adjust. So I'm going to do a random based off of the point number. So $PT. And then turn transfer and commutative off. And then let's turn the radius like that. And then this one, just kind of, and then let's add more points into the scatter here. Okay, and then let's just take these points and Boolean them all together. We're gonna, instead of subtract union. So if we look at a wireframe, hopefully, we should see that there's no inside geometry. You can see that a lot of the geometry is kind of eaten out, although there's some geometry that is kind of inside of each other, which is okay. We'll deal with that. But also, if we wanted to, we can do this in a fit 0, 1. That way it's not going all the way to 0. We can do from like 0.3 to 1. And maybe that will work a little bit better. You can see that it's eating out more of the shapes. 0.5 to 1.5. There we go. I like that a lot better. I'm just trying to create the general shape of the cloud that we're going to be working with. So let's look back from the camera view. I'm going to have it there. Let's see, where is it? It's right on the edge of what we have there. Okay. Let's go back out. Let's rename this. This is going to be our cloud. It's out in the distance. And then we have a cloud effects. And then let's create a cloud rig based off of that. So I'm going to delete the sunlight and the skylight because we already have a environment light, but we should have this cloud rig. Actually, let me bring those back in. Nope. Okay. I was just checking to make sure. Let's double click on this. We are not seeing anything right now. Let's go to the camera view and just see if it's rendering anything. Yeah, it's rendering it. So you can see that we do have the cloud. It's casting shadows on the environment. And then you can create several clouds or adjust the shape of this cloud if you'd like. So you can always go back to the original shape. Let's stop this. Let's say you thought it was too high. You can go here and go to this original shape and then maybe make it a little bit lower here. Let's just make it 1. It goes through and calculates it, and then for some reason here in the viewport we don't see it, but it does exist. You can obviously see it here. And then changing the seed of the points that are spreading out and things like that can really adjust the cloud. Right now it's pretty kind of pixelated. So if we go into the cloud here, We can go to cloud, sampling divisions. If we were to increase that, it should give us a much nicer edge. As you can see there, more definition. If we go here to the cloud noise, you can kind of give it some noise to kind of overcrank what's going on here. And that just gave us an error just because I was using the slider. So I gotta stop it and render it again to be able to see this. Here in the cloud light, we deleted the other light that existed, so we're gonna just use the environment light. And then we can go to the cloud light right here, max density. That's going to be the density of the cloud itself. I just want to try to make it more dense or less dense. We should have the cloud geometry here. So cloud density, we can also bring that down so that way more light goes through it. So depending on how dense you want it, you probably want it at least a little bit more so that you get some form into it. But then we can go back to the object level, not out, object level, and the same thing with the cloud here. Let's go into the noise. I really want to kind of crank up some of that noise so it looks a little bit better, the cloud. And then maybe go back into the original shape here and adjust it in the Z. Let's do like 50 and 20, just so that we have that. Then we're going to need a lot more points. Let's try 1,000. And then let's move the whole thing up. Okay, let's render this and see what it's looking like right now. Oh, it's been rendering the whole time. So this is more of like a more cloudy sky, where the other one we only had like a single cloud in the sky. I'd probably want a lot more geometry than I did there. Like I put 1,000, maybe I need like 10,000 or something like that. But I actually liked the kind of single poofy cloud. Let's put this back at like 8 into the way we had it. 8. Oh, it's rendering in the background still too. And 2. And then now it's going through and calculating everything. It's the main thing that's taking. Oh, and I have a ton of spheres. I put because I increased it up to 1,000. That is why I need to go back into the scatter node. I'm trying to cancel it. It's saying that it's canceling it, so that's good. The scatter, instead of 1,000, let's put 100. And let's go back into the scene view and make sure that we are still good. Okay, that looks good now. So we have that there. Let's turn the grass back on and let's take a look at the render that we have right now. We do have a black background, but if you save into a format that accepts alpha channel, like an EXR or a PNG, a TIFF or a Targa, any of those, you should be able to get a alpha where you can put a gradient or a image in the background for the sky that you'd like to use. Cool. So we have some rocks. We have a big cloud in the sky. We have some grass, some land and terrain. It's all looking pretty good. So let's get a render done, and then I'll do that Photoshop thing really quick so that we can bring in a sky. So I'm going to go back to the out level mantra. We're going to render from camera 1. Just render the current frame. That is good. I'm going to render to in play. And then that's going to go ahead and bring up a render view here that we can see the render that we're going to be saving out. Looks like the cloud can use a little bit more resolution, but we'll leave it like this. Basically, the uniform divisions, the more divisions we have, the more detail we're going to see in the edges and the crispiness of it. Okay, so we have this image now. We just have to save it out. So same frame as, and then it brings it up behind this window. Move this out of the way. Desktop. Enviro. Test render. And I'm going to change it to a PNG. and save. Then we should have on the desktop environment test render. If we double click on it, we should see what we have here. You can already see that there's the alpha there. We can actually check it here. We can turn on the alpha channel. You can see what the alpha channel looks like. Okay, so now that I know I got the image and that it looks good for what we need, we can go into Photoshop. Actually, let's just see if we can do it here. Right click, open with. Photoshop. Okay, it opened it just in another window. Or another monitor. Let me switch it over that way to the recording monitor. Okay, so we have the whole image here. And then let's open up the layers. Let's create a new layer. And then let's kind of have a nice white color like that. And then on the secondary color, do something like that. And then we're going to, instead of the paint bucket, do a gradient. And I think it would be this way. And I'm going to do a straight line. There we go. Do something kind of like that. And I didn't render out depth of field, but that would help a lot too. To kind of blend all this together, because then the edge would be blurry. But there we have an image. We can maybe merge these down and then save this image again. And then you can play with the levels and adjust things here. I have a software called Luminar 4 that it's pretty good for kind of tweaking it. You can also use Lightroom, which is really similar to this. But I have a whole bunch of images here. Let's add a single image. We have the environment test render. Here we go. And then we can go to light. We can kind of shift the light, bring the exposure up, add some contrast. AI enhance. We can adjust the sky so that it brings in the blues again. I'm going to actually bring the structure down because it's a CG scene, so it's going to look more fake that way. But if I kind of bring this down and boost it, and get a kind of fake depth of field happening here. Saturation, if we want it to look more realistic, we can bring the saturation down. Denoise, luminosity denoise, you can see that's going to clean up some of the cloud noise that you have there. And it's starting to look more painterly. You lose a little bit of the detail, but I think for it being in the background and kind of the style that I want to go with, it's better that way. There, I want to go back to color. I'm going to bring in some of the saturation again. Then I have some pro settings. Split toning. Shadows. This is what I want. Color enhancer, that's what I want. Just color. And bring some warmth. So the overall tone is going to be cooler, but when I bring in some warmth, you can see in like the grass, it really brings in some believability again. And then with the cool section, that brings in the cloud if you want, or you can push it to warm. Not the cloud, but I mean the sky. So we can kind of look at what we had before. It's pretty kind of flat. A lot more interesting to look at now. You can also split it, see what you got there. But you can do the same thing in Photoshop or Lightroom. But the idea is just to kind of make your render look a lot better. I think all in all, like if I had rendered the depth of field, it would have been much better than what this is. But just to kind of fake it and make it look some halfway decent, this works okay. So I'm just gonna export this image, and then that is it. We kind of did a simple terrain, we did some rocks, we did some grass, we created a cloud. We have a simple environment to start working with. Yeah, so that's kind of generating all of these different physical aspects that we're working on right now. All right. I hope you found this useful, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.